What's up, Fox? Dan Fox here. Today we talk about the Xbox One S in 2022. Now, you will have to forget my voice. After 2.5 years of evasion, the Rona has finally gotten to me, so I will sound a bit raspy today. But with that said, we are going to run through some benchmarks of the Xbox One S. The Xbox One S debuted on August 2nd, 2016 at a price of $300 to $400 depending on which one you got. There's a 500 gig, a 1 terabyte, and a 2 terabyte model, and price increased depending on which one you got. I got the 500 gig one back in 2017 when the price was way lower. I got it for $150 with 3 free games, which was just an insane value. Now, does it hold up in 22? That's the question. It had an 8-core custom processor by AMD, 8 gigs of DDR3 RAM, custom Radeon GPU with 1.23 teraflops, which whatever the hell that means, and a 4K UHD Blu-ray player. Now, this was a point of contention for people, and that's because back in the day, people didn't understand if this was a 4K gaming machine or what, because they made it seem really vague in some of the ads. Now, this is sort of, what's it called? Testimonial evidence per se, but I knew a lot of people who were kind of fooled by the fact that this was a 4K gaming machine when none of the games ran at 4K. It was still the exact same as the Xbox One, just with a 4K Blu-ray player. So that way you could play movies at 4K or Netflix at 4K, but games themselves still ran at a max of 1080p. And if they try to run games of 4K on this machine, I think the machine would literally cry itself to death. But the real question is, of course, how does it hold up in 2022? Now, let's start off with the most recent games on the list, starting off with Sniper Elite, which just came out. The 5th one, Sniper Elite 5. Did not look good, y'all. It looked worse than some original Xbox One titles. I don't know if you remember this, but back when Black Ops 3 came out on both Xbox 360 and Xbox One, and the Xbox 360 version was terrible, I feel like that's where we're going in terms of the Xbox One S compared to the Xbox Series consoles, is that the original Xbox One and the One S are really struggling to cling on to life, and Sniper Elite 5 is just one of those examples. There's pretty much no anti-aliasing, the game looks really bad, barely runs to 30 FPS, and it's just generally an unpleasant experience to play, and a sign of age for the Xbox One S. On the flip side of that, though, is another title. Now, I was surprised that this one didn't run at 60 FPS because I'm pretty sure R6 Siege did, but Rainbow Six Extraction, although it ran at a locked 30 FPS, wasn't as bad as some other games locked at 30 FPS, and generally speaking was an enjoyable experience, and their graphics were good enough for what they were. I think that it was certainly better than Sniper Elite 5, and I think it's partially because Rainbow Six is usually lighter games to play, and Extraction is no different, so it was still able to look good while maintaining a 30 FPS cap. MLB The Show 2022 had a mixed bag for me. There was no anti-aliasing whatsoever, so a lot of things looked really jagged. There were a bunch of frame dips and cutscenes, but at the same time, when actually playing the game, it was at a locked 30 FPS, which isn't bad for a game like this. And at the same time, the graphics looked quite good. Even though anti-aliasing sucked, player models looked pretty great. The actual baseball field itself looked good. Player models and their clothes looked really good. I had no complaints in terms of visuals whatsoever, and I think that MLB was a good game to run on this console. Now on the opposite side of that, Halo Infinite, boy oh boy. It still ran at a locked 30 FPS, but I'm surprised that for 30 FPS, this game looks as bad as it does. I mean, it is on par with maybe even Halo 5 from 2015. That's just how bad it looks. And again, I feel like it's the same thing with Sniper Elite 5, where these consoles are just getting absolutely pushed to their limits, and that's why games look terrible now, is because modern engines are taking more of a toll on these older systems, and they are just desperately trying to cling on to life. And Halo Infinite was not a fun experience to play. If you're fine with 30 FPS, then perhaps it's good enough for you, but unfortunately, it was just not fun for me to play. Doom Eternal, though, ran fantastic. It didn't look the best, I'll give it that, but it ran at a solid 60 FPS pretty much all of the time. And even though it doesn't look fantastic, it also doesn't look that bad either. So you weren't sacrificing a whole lot of visuals, and because of the art style, it kind of gets a pass from me. And again, having a locked 60 FPS game is not something to sniff at on the Xbox One S, since those are incredibly rare. So Doom is a game that I would definitely suggest playing, and of course it's also on Game Pass, which is a fantastic option for budget gamers who I think would be interested in a console like this. And you can't do a benchmark without Call of Duty Warzone, which was a mixed bag once more, because visually speaking, Call of Duty Modern Warfare always looked bad. So playing it on an Xbox One S in terms of visuals, making a bad game look slightly worse is better than making a good game look bad. So it really wasn't a terrible experience to look at. It still looked like Call of Duty, and it didn't seem like there were that many visual sacrifices made. Granted, the same as every other game applied. No anti-aliasing. Textures were muddy. Things like that. But again, with the way Call of Duty looks, this visual downgrade didn't turn out awful. And at the same time, it had an uncapped FPS, which is nice to have. Now, it's still going to be 30 FPS most of the time. There's no doubt about that. But when you're looking up at the sky, per se, you can get up to 60 FPS, which is a nice little thing to have. I'd rather have an uncapped frame rate than a locked 30 FPS all the time. And last but not least is Gears 5, a slightly older game, 2019. Still put this Xbox to its paces, and it was a struggle to run it, but it wasn't the worst experience. By far, one of the better experiences we had. The campaign ran at 30 FPS. I'm sure that the multiplayer runs at 60. I'm like, don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure that it runs at 60. The campaign looked good, but God, oh God, the Xbox One X even makes it look leagues and leagues better. And Gears 5 was always meant to be a graphical powerhouse, and I think the Xbox One S version sort of drops the ball on that. But at the same time, if you don't care about that, which I'm sure most people don't, you're still gonna have a good time playing Gears 5 on the Xbox One S. So that was the Xbox One S in 2022. If you're just looking for something cheap that can run games at 30 FPS, at 1080p to 720p, then I would recommend it. It's hard to say that because some of these games look and run terrible. If you can find an Xbox One X for around the same price, please splurge for that. If you can find a Series S, I know that eBay has them refurbed for $240 or something like that through authorized Microsoft sellers. Please go for that instead. Save up the extra 100 and get that. Or even the Xbox One X, you can find it for around $200. I think is a fantastic price. You'll get a much better longevity as well as gaming experience from those consoles. With that said, if you're looking for something cheap and dirty, Xbox One S is pretty good. I would also look at the PS4 just because I think that has aged a little bit better in terms of graphical fidelity, but at the same time, Xbox One S has Game Pass, so those are all things you're going to sort of have to weigh along with, of course, price. So that was sort of where I'm at. I would not recommend buying this in 2022 unless you're really looking for something cheap to play some video games on. Otherwise, I think you're better off looking elsewhere. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe. Do what you usually do, and as always, buy yourself something nice.
4570 was launched in quarter 2 of 2013 and had a recommended customer price of $192 to $202.
So definitely, it's a kind of a toss-up, but I feel like that's why it wasn't widely adopted.
Around $40 to $60.
I say that, and really
It has 4
yesterday I
cores,
watched
4
a
threads.